My name's Seb. I am 21 years old. I've been involved with Dorothy House for a few months now. So my mum actually was in care here for about a year or so back in 2015, and yeah, it was a beautiful place. They treated her very well, and she actually passed away here.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about what you remember as a 12-year-old boy of your mum's initial diagnosis and how that impacted on you as a child and the rest of your family?
Yeah, I can actually remember quite vividly the day she told me. I was playing WWE on the Xbox in the basement, and she came downstairs, sat cross-legged on the sofa with me, and said, "Got something to tell you. I've been diagnosed with cancer. We haven't told you for a couple of weeks. We didn't know how to because you're obviously young. Because I didn't know how to feel, if that makes sense. I didn't know what guidelines to follow. It didn't sink in at all. I was actually probably 10 years old when she was diagnosed. Because I was naive, because I was young, I sort of thought everything would be fine. She would get better. Didn't really make it out to be a really terrible thing in my head. So yeah, it wasn't actually as grave as I thought it proved to be later. When she first told me, I sort of took it in my stride a bit, didn't understand it maybe. But yeah, it's such an alien thing to hear, and there's nothing you can compare it to that. Yeah, it's exactly that, it's alien. There's no really way that you can expect to feel. So for me, it was maybe shock, maybe a lack of understanding, but I didn't initially feel any type of way about it. I didn't really know what to think, I suppose.
Do you think there's an element as well that your mum, as your caregiver, had always been there to make things right and to fix the problems? So was there an element of denial perhaps in your reaction?
Yeah, maybe, because growing up, both my parents worked a lot. My mum was a very fierce mother, always, because she had me, my brother and my sister all living at home at the same time. And Dad was working a lot, so she was like a superhero sort of thing. And I thought nothing would really knock her, I suppose, retrospectively. So yeah, I genuinely just didn't even have a doubt that she would be completely fine. And I never did, really. But at that specific time, I didn't crawl under a rock or anything. I genuinely didn't pay much thought to it.
And how did that change then over the next coming months for Amanda, your mum, and for you?
It was a strange one, because right until the day she passed, until probably a week before, I genuinely thought that it still would be fine. I knew my mum was ill. I knew my mum was unfortunately almost unrecognisable from before she got diagnosed. But I still always, I didn't even need to convince myself that she'd get better. I genuinely thought she would. I genuinely was completely safe in assuming that she would get through it, and it was just like a horrible thing that a wonderful woman had to deal with. But yeah, it was just genuinely lack of understanding. I was obviously kept out of the loop a little bit because I was young, but you can see what you see with your own eyes. So the way I interpreted that, because it's the first time I've seen someone looking that ill, to be honest, that I didn't really know what that meant. And my mum, being my mum, she always had a front on. She would always be enthusiastic. She'd always be, I'd get home from school and I'd go into a room and she'd be on a sort of like a nurse bed sort of thing. I'd go and talk to her about my day for an hour or two, and she'd be smiling and stuff like that. Even at times when she had breathlessness and stuff, she would still almost save her breath for that interaction, which was nice. But when you're a kid, if you think, at that age especially, I still thought my parents were superheroes sort of thing, so it never really fazed me.
And in the immediate aftermath of your mum's death, can you remember what that felt like as a child and what happened next?
Yeah, it's really abstract feeling. Now I'm older, obviously I think about these things a lot, and retrospectively I do think the word shock is a cliche. Like I was saying earlier, I always assumed she'd get better until the day before, a few days before, so I think shock was probably a big element. My biggest fear was coming across as looking for sympathy and attention from it. I didn't want to utilise what just happened, not to me, but what has just happened to my mum, because let's be honest, it's happened to my mum, it's not happened to anyone else. I didn't want to use that almost to my advantage, and I was terrified of that, so I tried to keep it as personal and as private as possible. I wasn't taught anything by someone with experience or older or like a mentor, and my dad was very conscious that he didn't want to overstep he didn't want to pry as well, because obviously he's just lost his soulmate, so he had all this stuff dealing with whilst trying to raise me. So yeah, it was a really abstract feeling. I would cry. I would cry every night for about 6 months, but normal day-to-day basis. Retrospectively, it didn't really affect me as most people think it would have. It was almost, just grey and abstract. It's hard to describe.
What does grief feel like to a 12-year-old?
Very strange. Very alien. It's weird because when me being the youngest family member, my brother's 13 years older than me, my sister's 8 years older than me, and obviously my dad, I'm looking at fully formed adults being utterly distraught, and I'm looking at my people I lean on being utterly distraught. Obviously, I've only seen my dad cry 3 times in my life, and I remember there was a day, it was the night of the 13th, is the day she died. We were renting a house. It wasn't our house, and we were just renting it. And it was midnight or so. I assumed everyone went to bed. I couldn't sleep, and went downstairs to get a drink. And it was a kitchen, and then a big window at the back of the kitchen, looking out to the garden. There was a sofa just in front of the window, and I heard sniffling, and I walked into the kitchen, and my dad was on his own after he put everyone to bed, after he put a brave face on, smiling all day. And he was on the sofa on his own, wrapped in mum's scarf, and he was just sniffing it. He was just trying to get her smell back after he lost her, and he was just bawling his eyes out. And my sister came down as well at the same time, coincidentally, and we all just sat on the sofa and no one said a word for about 15-20 minutes. I couldn't help but feel distraught for everyone. So you almost, in a family, if you lose a family member, you almost harness all of that family's grief as a young person as well, because you're inexperienced in that sense. You don't, and being a 12-year-old kid, being an ignorant 12-year-old kid, you want everyone to be happy and smiling all the time. You just assume that's your basis, because you're not an adult. You're not filled with information and reality of the world just yet. So up until that day, everything was just swimming for me. Like, I hadn't experienced grief at all. I didn't really know what grief was. I didn't even know if I obviously knew the word, but I didn't know. I couldn't even think of words to describe it. It was different every day, to be honest. It wasn't like it was a continuous process. It was just up and down, up and down. It wasn't flatline at all. So you're very reactive to positivity, because it almost feels like it's a rarity or a scarcity at that time. And negativity doesn't really affect you. And I think, retrospectively, when I was that sort of age, between 12 and 15, I would say a lot of things that I thought were funny and harmless to my friends, and then realise, actually, I was a bit aggressive or a bit argumentative, and then I used to fall out with people because of that, and then people would cut me slack because of what's going on, friends-wise. Grief as a 12-year-old is just a very confusing, no right answers, and it's like walking down a field in the middle of the night. There's not even a path there, and you have no idea which direction to go. And the only reason you keep on walking is because everyone else is around you. So that's the best way I can describe it, I think.
And tell us some of your favourite memories about your mum. What was she like?
She had very dry humour. It was quite funny. She used sarcasm a lot. Like, if someone was to ask a question that knew the answer was no, she would do so ridiculous and stuff like that. And then she had a really tightly knit group of friends that all had kids sort of my sort of age. Liz, I call my mum number 2. She was my oldest friend's mum, and I got a really good relationship with her. She would tell me stories that when she was struggling with her daughter, she would go dog walks with my mum, and mum would say, just stop being so ridiculous about it, just calm down, it's all fine, and stuff like that. So my mum was she's quite stoic, actually. She's an intelligent woman, very hardworking. She works in HR as well, so she's very good with people. But yeah, she just had so many attributes. A few of my favourite memories were walking with her a few times. Well, I was lucky enough to go skiing when I was younger, and I'd make her go with me to different runs on her own, so she could film me do jumps and stuff like that. Unfortunately, it's a little bit vague now, but every now and again, a new different memory that I didn't even know I had pops into my mind, so it's always lovely.
And how did you manage as a family to keep her memory alive?
So, historically speaking, Christmas was a very important time for us. All because of Mum. Mum would make it the perfect month, to be honest. December was just the perfect month. Like, she would spoil all of the kids, not necessarily with materialistic gifts, but just with the spirit of the house. She would love cooking. She would decorate the house. She would buy everyone Christmas calendars. And her birthday was on the 4th of July as well. So being the 4th of July, it's almost a celebration of the day anyway. So sometimes we go to Switzerland. My mum's favourite place was Switzerland. It's like serenity in the place, really beautiful mountains and everything. My mum was a big nature lover. She loved the yoga, meditation, quite spiritual, I suppose. Yeah, so every time we go to Switzerland, it's like a massive nostalgic sort of holiday. December every single year is a lovely month. It's a bittersweet month, but it's lovely. And yeah, for me, I think now we're all older, we're all in our own separate ways, my family members that is, we all kind of, like my sister was saying, her cooking, for example, keeps her sort of close to mum. For me, walking, I suppose. For me, just like pursuing my own ambition. I know mum would have wanted me to do that whilst being graceful, if that makes sense. So that actually makes me feel closer, I suppose. My brother just had a kid actually, and his daughter's name is Aurora, Ruth for a nickname, and her initials are AC, and that's what mum's initials were AC. So he wanted to have his daughter to have the same initial as mum. So everyone does it in their own different way, in their own ways, because they have their own specific relationship with mum. But yeah, we do try. We don't force it because it's been a while now. We don't force memory. We don't force celebrating, but it just comes so naturally anyway.
And did you want to keep your mum's name, Amanda, to keep it on people's lips, or did you want people to avoid speaking her name?
Well, I love it when people say Amanda. I love the name Amanda anyway, even if it wasn't my mum's name. I really like the name. And I love it when people talk about her in a more personal way instead of your mum. Like, yeah, but I want to know what she was to you. That's because I'm just still learning, because I missed out on the rest of my life learning about the woman my mum was. I've only got, to this day, my mum is my 12-year-old's view on who my mum was. Like, not my 21-year-old's view. So that's why she's a superwoman to me. Not like that would change, but I want to learn about her. I want to learn what she was like when she was my age for stuff, because I'll never find out, unfortunately. But I can get the best possible picture. So I love it when people are more personal about talking about her.
Who helped you navigate your pathway through that grief?
So my dad, without question. I didn't really let people, if I'm being honest. Looking back, loads of people tried to help. My dad tried to help every day. Liz Jones tried to help every day. My brother, my sister, my extended family. I'm conscious of missing people's names out, so people know if they did. Everyone would look out for me, if I'm being honest, but I wouldn't accept help from people, because I like to think that was okay. I like to think that because I'm a 12-year-old, I haven't got responsibility. Even now, look, I'm thinking about it, I did have the conscience, even as a 12-year-old, to appreciate I didn't have the responsibility that everyone else did. And I was conscious that my dad, for example, that wasn't getting the attention that I wasn't getting the care that I was. And people would go up to my dad and start talking about how hard it was for them that mum died.
And what role did your dad adopt in all of this?
So my dad there's not really anyone I've got more respect for in the world than my dad, really, because he parked, to be honest, all of his emotions, anger, all of the negative things you can think about to look after me. He would put everyone under his wing. He would keep everyone glued together. He'd be running around doing everything, not making time for himself, or maybe he did in private, but yeah, my dad was just a person that looks after everyone, really.
And can you tell us about the impact perhaps on your siblings as well, how they took it? Maybe it was different.
My sister's a very independent person. She was living in Manchester at the time, and her and mum, because they're both very independent thinking, very fierce, very opinionated, they obviously got into friction quite a lot of the time, but my sister dealt with it in that way. She sort of processed it on her own, and then would then use that as, because she was older, she was 20, she was at university at the time and stuff like that, so I don't think she really wanted to deal with it in a guided way, if that makes sense. I think because she's a bit of a free spirit, she just wanted to deal with it exactly how she did. My brother he's a big Labrador, he's a big emotional bloke, so he was older. My brother's 34 now, so he must have been 26 or so at the time. He was in London working, so he was quite busy, so he was working at HR and stuff, so saying he couldn't really put his life on pause for it, but I was living at home really, so They were older, they were both independent about it, and it was probably harder for them than it was for me, if I'm being honest, because they understood it more, and they still couldn't come back and see her every day, whereas I could, and I didn't understand it, so almost ignorance is bliss sort of thing.
And can you tell us a little bit about your memories of your mum being in care at Dorothy House, and the kind of things that Dorothy House did to support your family and you and your dad as well, maybe?
Yeah, so the place we're sat in right now, I spent 4 or 5 weekends here. Mum was actually on that bed in this room, and I was in there with my dad, and you look around, there's some beautiful scenery, there's a whole secluded little apartment, lovely for privacy. If I'm being honest, unfortunately I don't have, that's probably where the good memories sort of end. I was there on the day where my mum passed, so unfortunately that will be tattooed on my brain forever. But even when my mum was heavily sedated and she couldn't even speak much, she was still cracking jokes. She had a whole family in the room. Everyone was obviously distraught, but she was the only one who wasn't. And I remember she ordered a round of toast from the nurses, and then she got delivered to her table and she scoffed in about 20-30 seconds and said, "My toast." Couldn't even really hear what she said, but she had crumbs over her face and stuff. But yeah, she was just such a fierce mother and wife, and she put everyone else above herself. It was nice for someone to put her above them, and that's what Dorothy House did for her.
In what way?
It's a cliche, but literally just due care and attention. How attentive the nurses were, how much time they gave to my dad, especially, even to me. Like they let me kick a football outside the front, I remember. It was almost perfectly catered for it. They weren't intrusive, they weren't almost knocking on the door to see if everything's alright. They would just always be on hold, if that makes sense, always there if you needed. And just lovely people. That's the most important part of yours. They're just really nice, caring, lovely people.
So obviously the diagnosis of a friend or loved one with a life-limiting illness can have ripple effects in so many different ways, and people's reactions can be so varied as well. How did you find other people's reactions to your mum's diagnosis, and how did that impact on you?
I remember not wanting to go to school, not because I was upset. I couldn't be bothered for so many people coming up to me and saying, "Oh, I heard this, I heard this, I heard this." I didn't even want to tell my teachers, but obviously my dad did tell my teachers. I remember speaking to my teacher saying, "Look, I'd appreciate if you didn't talk to other people about it." It was strange because I was young. I remember not really appreciating the gravity of the situation, and I would almost say it without a filter. So a few times I would talk to my friends about it, and then their mum would then message my parents, or their parents would message my parents saying, "I just heard Seb say this," and stuff like that, but I never understood. So I remember I had to sit down a few times and say, "You can't go around talking about it in normal conversation, because it's not normal conversation." I didn't realise that. I wasn't really consulted because I was 12, I wasn't 10 to 12, I wasn't consulted too much by adults. A few of my friends knew, but obviously they're 10 to 12 as well. I personally didn't really experience much of how other people were feeling about it, especially the diagnosis stage. Later I did, obviously, but I think everyone respected our family space a little bit. Everyone sort of tried to appreciate that we wanted privacy and stuff, and my mum wanted that. So because my mum wants to present herself as a strong, fierce woman, I don't think she really was keen on people knowing. So.
And in terms of the school support, was that obvious? Was there any support, or was the focus on the academia?
There was support. Like, you have to cut a lot of slack because they're teachers, they're not counsellors, they're not therapists. The one thing that was hard for me was I had a meeting with the head of year just to see how I was doing, sort of thing, which is nice. They took time out to see me. I remember my form tutor told the whole class what had happened after I did explicitly ask if he didn't do that. But it came from a good place, it came from good intentions, but I do think you just need to follow the lead of people that it's happened to, as opposed to sort of think that you're a genius in your own mind and take it upon yourself. But I remember getting a report card, I got given a D4, 1 being good, 4 being the worst. And my report card came through on the 15th of December. My mum passed on the 13th of December. I got given a 4 for effort. The description was, seems distracted in lessons. The teachers are not therapists or counsellors, but yeah, I remember opening that and thinking, wow, there's definitely a massive opportunity for a lot of work to be done, because I've experienced it myself.
What were the kind of things that people said that really grated with you during the period maybe before your mum died, and then separately afterwards?
The thing is, afterwards, me being a boy growing up with all my mates, like, you get mum jokes all the time, especially at that sort of age, everyone's cracking jokes and stuff. But if someone would say a mum joke to me, they haven't done that on purpose, and they just haven't thought about it. I wouldn't even call them out on it, because I would just kind of look at them like that, and they wait 5 seconds and the face would turn completely. But that was hard. And like I said earlier, I didn't want to make a scene at all. I didn't want to use what had happened to develop my character, if that makes sense. I didn't want to use that as an excuse to be an angry kid and do what I wanted, which would have been really easy to. For a couple of years, I was quite a badly behaved kid. It's a tough one because you feel so isolated. I wanted to show my dad that I was alright. I wanted to prove to myself I was doing alright. And my friends, me being around my friends, was the only time I felt like I could be a normal kid, because we just talk about football or whatever like that. When you get into the headspace that, or maybe my friends are just almost counselling, this is immediately off. Me and my friends are just trying to be nice because they think I'm distraught all the time. Sometimes you really want people to look out for you and understand that, yeah, he's been through a lot recently, and you want people to almost acknowledge that without talking about it sometimes, in my opinion anyway. On the other hand, the other 50% is that you want people to just pretend it didn't happen because you are pretending it didn't happen, sort of thing. So,
can you talk to me a little bit about that angry phase? Obviously you were a teenager when your mum died, coming up to a teenager. That is in itself is, really tumultuous for most kids. Was that the phase where you found it even harder? Because I guess people listening to this podcast might be interested in how to support teenagers going through grief.
I've actually thought a lot about this recently. If I'm being completely honest with myself, I don't like this, but I almost fell in love with presenting myself as the person who, despite everything that's just happened to him, he's still laughing, he's still having a good time, he's still not submitting to what had happened. And I kind of fell in love with that image. I fell in love with how it was perceived. And it's actually one of my biggest regrets, because I did utilise what had happened. A lot of my anger came from me knowing that I was doing that. Like walking into a room with all my friends, for example, most people think, maybe feeling awkward because they don't know what to say, or making sure they say the right things, people laugh. I didn't care at all, because I felt people wouldn't even dare say anything, if that makes sense. I actually had a lot of anger because I felt like I was letting myself down. I felt like I was letting mum down a bit sometimes, to be honest, because I was not reacting in the perfect way. I wasn't holding myself in the perfect light that she would have wanted the whole time. I wasn't doing what would be the most pure, best way to go about it. But looking back, I was so hard on myself because of it. I know that now. A lot of my anger came from confusion, to be honest, and just almost an internal monologue of how I should be feeling and how I should be conducting myself. I wasn't arguing with myself. It wasn't like a split personality sort of thing. It would just kind of creep up on you, this massive grey blanket of feeling like you've let something down. And as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, it's an immense amount of pressure when you're trying to make your mum proud and trying to make sure that you conduct yourself perfectly every day. Really, in reality, you're just so angry and upset and confused all the time. I was angry at the world, and I was angry at myself. I had a lot of guilt because I felt like I should be missing mum more. I felt like my heart should be aching like 24 hours a day, but when it wasn't, I was thinking, what's wrong with me, sort of thing? Like, why can't I feel this? I almost felt like I was doing her a disservice by not missing her all the time. The more I sat around and did nothing, the more I would think, and consequently the more I think about mum. So, and the more comfort I found in that, I could almost just swim with the thoughts of my past for a bit. For a long time, that was the last time that I felt whole. So I would almost live in that trance, if that makes sense. I would go to school, and unless I was doing something active and I was fully immersed in that activity, like sport, for example, my mind would drift back to the past and think about mum and all that sort of stuff, and just, if anything, think about how lucky it was to have a full family where everyone got on. And I'm looking at my friends every day and they have that. And a lot of my anger came from people not appreciating that. But I remember just looking around thinking, I really don't know how fortunate you are, because I just see it as a reality for them. And my reality was in a straight line until 12 years old, and then it completely changed.
So what does grief and the space without your mum look like to you now as an adult?
Because I still cling on to when I had my mum with me. I still have a 12-year-old in me I still have a kid in me that misses his mum, to be honest. I'm still a kid at heart that sometimes really wants his mum. And I've got things in my life. I've got my dad's partner Tamara, a lovely woman, I love her to bits, and she is a maternal figure for me. Liz Jones, that I've talked about, my oldest friend's mum, is a maternal figure to me. So I look for that in people, but it's never going to be the same, because my mum was one in a million. But the grief today, I would say, it's a tough one. Like I said earlier, being the less you do, the closer you feel. For me, if I sit around and do nothing, consequently I'll be thinking, and consequently my thoughts will be there, because they always do for me. But if I'm an adult, I'm 21, I've got more responsibilities than I did when I was 12. I have less time to grieve. I have less opportunity to, even if I want to. And I still have that 15-year-old's anger in me sometimes. I still have glimpses of that, much rarer now, because I can control it better. I look at the people it's affected, and I still look to the sky and think, wow, how could you do this to these people? Like, and my brother's daughter's never going to meet her grandma. My brother's wife isn't going to meet her mum-in-law. Same goes for my sister, same goes for me when it comes to it. So I get annoyed at the things that I would be missing out on, and then I remind myself, don't go down that selfish route. This didn't happen to you, this happened to mum. Sometimes I really wish I could just do nothing all day so I can think about it all the time and be closer to her. But I know one wouldn't want that to start with. It's the same as it was, just less raw. That's how I describe it. And the hardest part for me, I can already see my memories of mum being less vivid now compared to when I was 12. And I plan on sticking around for a while, so in 20 years it's going to be even less vivid and less vivid. So that's the thought that brings me the least amount of peace, to be honest. Because I have about 5 to 10 memories that I can literally visualise in the flesh right now with mum, but I'm just hoping that they stay there, to be honest.
So would you mind sharing your top 3 tips for how to support a young person who's going through grief?
It sounds weird letting a 12-year-old dictate the course of the conversation, obviously, and that's probably why it doesn't happen very often, because adults will feel that it's their role to be more superior in that conversation, but that's not the case. I would have loved if I would almost be the one leading the conversation, because then I can go where I want to go. And that's what people want to do when people are venting. And if you're in a context where someone is talking about their grief, most of the time that's a vulnerable spot for them to be in. And they would, because it's a vulnerable spot, they would then want to conduct it exactly how they plan to, instead of throwing in some unpredictable conversation and something they need to reply to and need to think about. You want to be in a state where you don't want to think about anything. So my advice number 1 would be exactly that: be as receptive as possible. Don't try and, you will 100% feel like you can help and jump, and you want to butt in and say, yeah, but have you thought about this? Because you're trying to help, because it comes from a good place, and you feel like you're an older person, you feel like you can help them, but it's going to be hard to not do that. But I feel it's vital that you need to do that. You have to let this young person approach it the way they want to, because that is the most benefit that you will get out of it, not what you think you will. And then on top of that, not condescending. It depends on the age of the child. If it's really young, then I don't think they notice. But if it was my age or older, when you're trying your hardest to be strong and someone talks to you like you're weak, beyond face value, that's a really annoying thing to deal with. When you're trying to be puffy chest out and be broad shoulders and forget about it, and then people remind you that it's a really sad concept, it's quite infuriating sometimes, because you just don't want to be, and also you want to be talked to like a normal person. That's what you're looking for. And then finally, as well, leading back to the first point, before you actually have that conversation, don't force the conversation. It's similar to men's mental health, with talk it out and stuff like that. Yeah, 100% talk it out, but don't force someone to talk about something they don't want to talk about. Because it's never going to work. Even if they do talk, it's not going to be authentic. They're going to just try and think about things to say. Let it known that you're always there for this young person. Let it known that you always will make yourself available if they ever need you. But don't force them to have an interaction, and don't feel that because they haven't spoken about it, they need to speak about it. Because like I said earlier, grief's so authentic. There's no parameters you can set in place. You just have to take each day as it comes.